Murshidabad, a Hindu banking family, rises to become India's most powerful financiers. They would control the fate of empires, but their wealth came with a price. They begin as refugees from the deserts of Rajasthan, chasing survival along the Ganges. Within a few decades, emperors owe them money, Nawabs bow to their ledgers, and European companies line up for credit. Their name, Jagat Seth, banker of the world. But power built on paper and promises is fragile. One day, a young Nawab will challenge their monopoly, and the Jagat Seths will answer with a betrayal. That opens the door to 200 years of British rule. This is not a simple story of villains and patriots. It's the story of what happens when money becomes more powerful than kings. The year is 1652. A Jain Oswald trader named Hiranan Shah leaves Nagar in Rajasthan. Famine, debt, and politics push him east to Patna, a booming mule saltpeter and trading hub. He starts small, jewelry, money changing, advancing credit to merchants. But Patna is plugged into an imperial economy. Saltpeter flows from Bihar to Europe, and Hiranan's ledgers swell with each shipment. By the time he dies in 1711, his sons run branches across eastern India. They aren't just money lenders. They're the invisible wiring of mule finance. The family fortune is already building toward an estimated 14 crore rupees. In some modern estimates, that's like handling assets worth hundreds of billions, even up to $1 trillion in today's money. When Bengal's capital shifts to Murshidabad, the family follows the money. Manik Chand, then his nephew Fateh Chand, become treasurers, revenue collectors, and mint supervisors for the Nawabs of Bengal. The Mule Emperor notices. In the early 18th century, the head of the family receives a new title, Jagat Seth, Banker of the World. Some say it's under Emperor Farrukhsiyar, others under Muhammad Shah. Historians debate the details, but everyone agrees the title reflects staggering power. On big commercial loans, Bengal's great bankers charge around 12 to 15% interest per year, similar to modern high-risk corporate loans, while small borrowers can face rates many times higher. How many clients do they serve? At the top alone, the Mule Emperor, multiple Nawabs of Bengal, the East India Company, other European firms, and dozens of zamindars. If the Rothschilds controlled Europe, the Jagat Seths controlled Bengal. But this was only the beginning. From Murshidabad, the house of Jagat Seth builds what is, in effect, a private central bank. They control the mints at Murshidabad and Dhaka, set exchange rates, collect revenues, and move tribute from Bengal, Bihar, and Odisha to Delhi using the Hundi system, paper orders instead of dangerous carts of silver. Their branch network reaches at least from major cities, Murshidabad, Dhaka, Patna, and Delhi, with key links to Surat and beyond. Their branches stretch across the richest parts of the Mule East. European observers compare their firm to the Bank of England. Some modern writers go further, suggesting that at its peak, the family's wealth rivaled or even surpassed national economies under Nawab Murshid Quli Khan and later Alivardi Khan. The Jagat Seths are more than bankers. They are policy makers. They decide how much coin to mint, what taxes can realistically be collected, and which military campaigns can be funded. One modern estimate claims the Jagat Seth network influenced roughly half of Bengal's economy, at least in terms of formal financial flows. That doesn't mean half the rice in every village passes through their hands, but it captures a basic truth. If money moves in Bengal, it probably touches their book stock if the Rothschilds controlled Europe. The Jagat Seths controlled India's richest province. And here's the twist. They don't start out as friends of the British. Early on, they helped Nawabs resist expanded company trade privileges, fearing that free trade for Europeans will hollow out Bengal's tax base and their own business. So how does a family that once tries to limit British privileges end up bankrolling Britain's conquest? What happens when the guardians of a regional economy decide that protecting their balance sheet matters more than protecting their homeland? At their peak, popular modern estimates place their notional wealth at the equivalent of hundreds of billions of dollars, even approaching $1 trillion in some calculations, more than today's biggest tech fortunes. Historians warn that such numbers are speculative, but they agree on the core point. These are some of the richest private financiers on Earth. Yet beneath this success lies a darker truth. The Jagat Seths weren't just bankers. They were kingmakers. When the young Nawab Siraj-ud-Dowlah threatened their monopoly, they made a choice that would change India forever. They chose the British. The year is 1756. The new Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dowlah, is young, suspicious, and volatile. He sees the East India Company fortifying Calcutta, hoarding wealth, and ignoring his authority. He also hears the rumors. The Jagat Seths have become a state within a state, powerful enough to topple Nawabs. Siraj pressures them. There are whispers he might confiscate their treasure, as other rulers have plundered wealthy bankers before. For a family built on trust and liquidity, confiscation is a nightmare. Enter Robert Clive and the East India Company. After clashes with Siraj, Clive looks for allies at court. He doesn't just need soldiers. He needs money, enormous sums to pay troops, bribe commanders, and buy loyalty. Company officials and the Jagat Seths quietly open talks with Mir Jafar, Siraj's disaffected general, in return for placing Mir Jafar on the throne. The conspirators will share massive payments and trade privileges. One modern reconstruction of these deals suggests that secret promises worth more than £4 million in 18th century money, the equivalent of hundreds of millions of pounds, today are put on the table in cash, jewels, and land revenues. From the Jagat Seth perspective, this is brutal pragmatism. Siraj seems erratic and dangerous. British merchants, for all their arrogance, appear to honor contracts, aligning with the company, and Mir Jafar looks like the safest way to protect their assets, their Hundi network, and the very idea of private banking in Bengal. But from a wider historical perspective, the choice is catastrophic. By financing a coup at Plassey, they help shift power from a regional Indian court to a foreign corporation. The East India Company may still be a commercial outfit on paper, but after Plassey it will act like a state. So were the Jagat Seths defending themselves from a reckless ruler, or selling out an entire subcontinent for security? On the 23rd of June 1757, At the Battle of Plassey, roughly 50,000 Bengal troops face about 3,000 company soldiers. But huge sections of the Nawab's army simply do not fight. Siraj loses not to superior firepower, but to superior financing. What happened next would change everything. After Plassey, Mir Jafar becomes Nawab. The price of his throne is astronomical. He pays around 17.7 million rupees in compensation and gifts to the company and its officers, plus more in land grants. The Jagat Seths help channel these sums. For the Jagat Seths, the short-term gains are immense. They collect old debts, earn commissions on indemnities, and deepen their role as indispensable middlemen between the Nawab and the company. Their hundreds become the bloodstream of a new colonial economy. Revenue from Bengal's peasants is turned into silver in Murshidabad, then into company profits in London. Here's a surprising fact. Modern banking in India wasn't brought by the British alone. A century before British civilizing claims, the Jagat Seths were already running something very close to a central bank, minting coins, managing public funds, and setting exchange rates by the 1750s. Contemporary observers put the family's fortune at about 14 crore rupees. Modern writers sometimes compare that to hundreds of billions, even up to $1 trillion in today's money. The exact conversion is impossible, but the idea is clear. They stand among the richest private financiers of their age. But if their power is so great, who really controls whom? The company ruling Bengal, or the bankers funding the company? At first, the partnership looks mutually beneficial. The company gets cash and credit. The Jagat Seths get reliable interest payments and influence. Some records suggest the company draws around 400,000 rupees of credit a year from Marwari bankers like them in this era, a substantial line of credit. But as British power grows, attitudes shift. Officials in Calcutta start to ask a blunt question. Why keep paying commissions to Indian bankers when you can simply take over their role? Meanwhile, Mir Jafar proves unreliable. The company replaces him with Mir Qasim in 1760, again with heavy financial engineering behind the scenes. As trade exemptions and tax disputes escalate, Mir Qasim tries to assert independence, cutting into both company profits and Jagat Seth influence. In the chaos of Maratha raids, some accounts claim that around 25 million rupees are looted from the Jagat Seth mansion itself. Even the bankers of the world are not safe from the violent currents they helped create. By 1763, tensions between Mir Qasim and the company erupt into open war. The Jagat Seths, once kingmakers, now face suspicion from both sides. To Mir Qasim, they are the bankers who made and unmade Nawabs. To the company, they are useful, but dangerously independent intermediaries. At their height, the Jagat Seth firm employs hundreds of agents and clerks across Bengal and North India. In 1763 or 1764, at Manga Fort, Mir Qasim has Jagat Seth Motabroy and his cousin Maharaj Swarup Chand seized. They are shot and thrown from the ramparts, a public execution of the men who once decided who would rule Bengal. The consequences are immediate and devastating. With Motabrai dead and the treasury and mint shifting to Calcutta, the Jagat Seth business model collapses. Younger heirs inherit the title, but not the influence. They spend lavishly, while the company builds its own financial machinery and centralizes control. Today, the house of Jagat Seth stands as a museum in Murshidabad. Its underground rooms, secret tunnels, and dusty ledgers whispering of a time when one family's credit lines stitched together an empire. But their legacy is larger than a single mansion. The financial system the British built in Bengal, revenue farming, centralized treasuries, long-distance credit, bills of exchange, rests on structures the Jagat Seths helped perfect: hundis, clearinghouses, and the fusion of state finance with private banking. Modern banks, with their checks, wire transfers, and intercity credit, echo these hundis. If hundis were the email of early modern finance, the Jagat Seth network was one of the world's earliest and most powerful global inboxes. By around 1912, the last recognized member of the Jagat Seth line is said to die, the family living on a colonial pension rather than legendary riches. After Buxar and the formalization of company rule, British control hardens. The descendants of the family fade into obscurity. Like the mules they once financed, they become ghosts in the archives. So how should we remember them? As visionaries of finance or as architects of foreign rule? Historians debate whether the Jagat Seths sold India to the British at Plassey. Some argue they acted like rational business magnates, faced with a dangerous ruler and a powerful foreign corporation. They chose the partner they believed would honor contracts and protect capital. Others claim that by funding the company, they enabled a structural looting of Bengal, from Plassey plunder to the devastating Bengal famine of the 1770s, and share moral responsibility for the exploitation that followed. Some argue the Jagat Seths were simply playing the same dangerous game they had always played, backing the winning horse. Whether Alivardi Khan, Mir Jafar, or the company, others claim that Plassey marks a moral line. After 1757, their choice is no longer just reshuffle Nawabs. They reshape the destiny of a subcontinent. Can national betrayal even be the right term in an age when ideas of nationhood were still forming, and loyalties ran to city, court, caste, and creed rather than to India as we know it today? In the 18th century, Bengal's economy ranks among the largest regional economies in the world. Across India, elite families make similar choices. In Mysore and the Maratha Confederacy, some bankers back resistance against the British. In Awadh and Hyderabad, others cut deals, hoping to preserve local autonomy. The Jagat Seths stand out not because they collaborated, but because they collaborated at the exact tipping point, when Bengal's wealth could still have constrained British ambition. Rather than fueling it. What if, in 1757, the Jagat Seths had refused to fund Clive? Imagine a Plassey where Mir Jafar lacks the money to bribe commanders, where Siraj's army actually fights, where the company loses and retreats to Calcutta, chastened. Would Britain still have conquered India? Perhaps, but slower, more brutally, and through different alliances. Or perhaps another Indian power would have risen in Bengal's place. The truth, as always, is more complicated than a single what-if. Finance doesn't work in isolation. It rides on armies, famines, and global trade currents. Yet it's hard to escape the feeling that a few signatures on those secret treaties tipped the balance of history. From Plassey in 1757 to the Rebellion of 1857. Roughly a century of company rule rests in part on early financial alliances like these. If you visit Murshidabad today, you can walk through the house of Jagat Seth and see their coins, muslin, and ledgers. Nearby, at Hazardouari Palace, you can look out over a landscape once richer than London, where deals scribbled in ink shaped the lives of millions. The descendants of the family are mostly anonymous now, folded into the vastness of modern India. But their story lingers whenever the word Gadda, traitor, is thrown at collaborators, or when people debate whether commerce can ever be morally neutral. In an age where global finance still topples governments and shapes wars, are we really so different from the world of the Jagat Seths? The Jagat Seths chose profit over patriotism. Their wealth vanished, but their choice shaped nearly 200 years of colonial rule. Were they shrewd businessmen or India's greatest traitors? History remembers both. Tell us in the comments. Were the Jagat Seths victims of their time, forced into impossible choices? Or were they the ultimate example of how financial power can betray a people?